don't need a high-end designer or a lot of money to get a luxe look. Be your own interior designer.
This is Affordable Interior Design, the podcast.
Here's your host, Betsy Helmuth.
Hi, everyone. It is great to be back with you again this week. Today, I am joined by a very special guest. As you guys know, I do not have a green thumb. While I appreciate plants, I am not a connoisseur. But today, I do have a connoisseur with me. Her name is Maria Failla. Some of you may know her from her amazing podcast, Bloom and Grow Radio Podcast. So without further ado, let me have her introduce herself. Welcome, Maria.
Hi, Betsy. Thanks for having me. Yes, we're like the yin yang, I feel like, that every interior design person needs, because most interiors look really good with plants, but I feel like they don't necessarily go hand in hand. So I've got all the plant answers and you've got all the interior design answers, which is super fun.
And I love it because we're podcast swapping. So for
Exactly.
those of you who want to hear interior design content on a plant podcast, you have to check out Maria's podcast. I think it's dropping in January. And then, of course, she's on my podcast. So we can cross-pollinate. Did you see what I did there?
I
We can
love that.
cross-pollinate our information because, as I was telling her on her show, I said, the very last thing, as I'm leaving the client's apartment or their house, I'm putting my shoes on, I'm packing up my measuring tape, and they always stop me and they say, oh, Betsy, we forgot. What about plants?
hmm
And then I make that face and I'm like, you have to have plants?
Yeah.
And then I say, well, if we have to have plants, but you're just right, Maria, I don't know how to guide people. And I don't want to provide them with recommendations that won't thrive. So that's why you're here today, to help educate me and our listeners on, how to recommend plants, how to help them thrive in like placements of rooms.
Yeah. And I just want to say before we dive in, I totally get it. I totally get that because I was actually a notorious plant killer before I became the plant lady that I was today. And interior design and wanting to nest in a home is actually what instigated my love for plants. So I killed every plant I had ever interacted with as an adult. Whatever weird thing you've done to a plant, I've 100% done it. I've, only watered them at night, only spritzed their leaves, completely forgotten about one for 3 months. I mean, I have a pretty extensive plant graveyard. And when I moved in with my he's my husband now. He was my boyfriend back then. I really wanted to nest, and we were living in most of his stuff, which wasn't exactly my design aesthetic. And so I decided, okay, well, it would be really nice. I want to take care of something. I'm in love. Maybe I'll get some plants to kind of freshen the place up. We had a nice little balcony. We grew herbs together, and when I started having plants in my home, that's when my home actually started to feel like a home. And my life kind of changed because as an overstimulated millennial, I'd wake up and immediately start scrolling Instagram or Pinterest. And once I started caring for plants, I would take my coffee instead. And instead of being with my phone, I would go sit on my balcony and I would enjoy my herbs and I would smell my basil and I would watch dew drop, excuse me, I would watch dew drop off of the leaves, and have this like really meditative experience. And it was really beautiful. So, that's why I started Bloom and Grow Radio. I was actually kind of still killing plants at the beginning. You can kind of track my whole plant parenthood journey through like the 150 episodes that I have. But the podcast was really to interview experts and learn alongside my listeners, to educate and empower everybody to care for plants successfully and cultivate more joy in their lives. And I really feel like, every room needs a plant, but it's all about having a plant that can thrive and be successful in said room so you don't start feeling bad about yourself. Because I feel like once you kill a plant or two, then you label yourself a plant killer and you actually like carry some shame about it. And everybody thinks that that's a unique experience, but it's really not. So many people have been there and you just don't know. And we talked about this when you were on my podcast. You just don't know what you don't know when it comes to design tips, design sense, and plant care. And the only difference is education, right? So hopefully we're going to bust some plant myths today, and your listeners will walk away with some really tangible, actionable steps to get blooming and growing.
Wonderful. Well, it gives me hope that you started out in this dark place,
Yes.
because I will hang on to a plant, not wanting to like toss it. I feel like it's like a soul or something. So I'll hang on
Mhm.
to it until it's crispy and brown and
Yeah.
fried. And like people are kind of like appalled by the plant. And
Mhm.
then I'll put it on the curb.
Mhm.
But it takes that long for me to get there. Now, you know, what should we be thinking about? Because when I'm looking at a room, I always add the plants last because then I know where I have surfaces, right? I
Mhm.
know where I can put a planter. I know where I have an open corner that needs a larger plant. So I always think about them at the end, but then that doesn't always take into account the type of light that they need.
Yeah.
So, how do you recommend plotting your plants around a room?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think interior designers see spaces, right? They see the holes that they want to fill the plants in. And I think plant people see windows, right? So I
Mm.
think when you're evaluating where you want to put your plants, the first thing you have to do is figure out your windows, what direction they're facing, and how much natural light you're actually getting. Because unless you have grow lights, which are, and we can talk about that a little later, which are like light bulbs and light fixtures that actually, mimic the sun with the photosynthetic spectrum, your ambient light in your home isn't going to give the plants the light that they need. So to take a further step back before we dive into that, it's really important to understand that plants eat light. Plants need light to survive. So they use photosynthesis to create they basically absorb radiant energy from the sun and they convert it into something that they can kind of burn or quote unquote eat. So I like the term plants eat light because it just kind of like makes it further understandable for humans. So if there's no natural light, if there's no sunbeams or sun hitting these plant leaves, the plant is basically slowly dying, and the plant can kind of survive for a long time and kind of exist on what it has, but you really need to make sure that you're setting your plant up for at least a little bit of success with a little bit of light. And there are different plants for different levels of light in rooms that we can also talk about, but I think it's really important to just really stress like your plants need light. If you have a bathroom with no windows, you can't put a plant, like no light, no plants, or you can come up with other alternative ideas that we can talk about in a little bit. So windows are so important because that's obviously where the sun comes in. So, what I always recommend is kind of doing an environmental assessment when you move into your new home. So, the easiest kind of general guidelines to use for this is understanding exposure for windows for north, south, east, west. So, you've hit the lottery for plant care if you have southern facing windows if
Mm.
you're in the northern hemisphere. So that's going to be the brightest windows that you could get if they're unobstructed. Then, if you think about it, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. So it gets a little hotter as it sets. So the second strongest light window exposure is going to be western facing windows.
Oh.
Then you're going to have eastern facing windows because they get that gentler morning light. And then, if you think about it, northern windows are going to have the least amount of light because that sun never actually goes right in the window. You're going to get ambient light, but the sun is going to be able to go right through a southern facing window.
Mm.
So it's super easy to assess if you don't like just know where your apartment faces or where your home faces. You can just open the compass app on your phone. When we were house shopping, I was like a freaking maniac with my compass app walking up to all of the different windows like looking for the different exposure. um and then you can go from there. So you're going to be in like the highlight area, southern, western, medium light, eastern, low light, northern. And then you have to take your surroundings in.
Mm.
So, a great example, if you're an interior designer designing a apartment, I lived in New York City for 10 years. I lived in several different apartments, and every apartment had a very different light situation. So I had a huge southern facing window in one of my apartments, which should be the jackpot, but I had an enormous apartment building in front of it, which blocked the
Mm.
sun. So it actually rendered it like a low light situation. So the first step is kind of understanding your window exposure. And then the second step is just kind of standing in your room, getting a sense for are there sunbeams coming in, right? You can
Mm.
see if a sunbeam is actually hitting a plant or if a sunbeam travels across your room throughout the day. So there's just kind of ways that you can kind of get your spidey senses going, but like turn off your lights and actually see what your natural light is. I mean, I feel like for interior designers, natural light is always kind of the jackpot anyway, right?
We love natural light, but I also love artificial light. Like, I like being able to control what's going on. I love
Hmm.
my three-way switches, my dimmer bulbs, but again, it's so interesting because I have, my plant right over there,
Hmm.
and, I think it's thriving and surviving. It's behind me if you guys are watching on YouTube. It looks like it's thriving and surviving. It's been months, but it doesn't get any sun ever. So Maria has told me my plant is slowly dying. That's
So it's
so
probably not
sad.
as now if you get ambient light in that room, like if it's a bright room and it's in bright indirect light, it could be good. But if it is in like kind of a windowless room, I can't really see from this video perspective that I have, but yeah, it might be just hanging in there. It might be hanging in there with whatever little light it needs. So you can also think about it like raindrops. I have another friend who's a horticulturist who says that like the volume of light you need is kind of important. So it's like think about photons of light being like little raindrops that hit plant leaves.
Mm.
So you're just getting not as much. Your plant would probably love to eat a little bit more light if you could put it in a higher light situation, but
Yeah.
also if you have low light spaces, the cool thing is grow lights are an amazing alternative now to natural light, and they have grow lights in the coolest modern
I am
fixtures.
anti-grow light.
Oh, are you really?
I think so. That light, I have some clients who are super into plants.
Mhm.
That light is so harsh.
So you're probably okay. So it depends when these friends had their grow lights, but there used to be when you used to have grow lights, it used to only be like purple or orange or blue or like
Yes.
super orange, super bright. There are like luxury grow light companies now that have
Oh,
created like museum quality lighting that mimics the sun with that photosynthetic spectrum. So
wow.
I have 3 of these lights. They're called Soltech Solutions lights. They're aspect pendant style lights. I hang them in my ceiling. They're super modern and they look like
Wow.
any other light. I swear, I have friends over I entertain. No one knows it's a grow light until I point it out. It's also usually, it's hanging above my plants, so it's like a focal point.
Right.
Um, and now they also make really amazing light bulbs that have the photosynthetic spectrum in them, and it's like any other light bulb that you just screw into a desk lamp. So you could have a desk lamp next to that plant and have just a smart plant light
Wow.
bulb in there, and it would just look like any other normal desk lamp.
Yes, because I was thinking of those elongated tubes.
You're thinking of T5 tubes, yeah,
Oh, and
which
they
are
just turn my stomach, and, I don't wanna yuck anyone's yum, but
mhm.
as I'm designing for these people, I'm like, "What are we gonna do with these tubes?" So that is very illuminating.
Yeah, and it's very illuminating, and most lights are also LED now. So
Mm.
those tubes were T5s that you're talking about. LED lights, they're a lot easier to install. So I have LED strips like under my bookshelf. So I've turned like an entire bookshelf into a grow shelf, which is really cool. They've really made a lot of solutions, and if they all come with timers, so you
Oh,
set them and the amount of time that the light needs to be on for the plant to photosynthesize enough. Some of them have dimmers. I have ones that actually dim and they mimic the sun, so they like fade in and fade out like a sunrise and a sunset.
right.
So I will say in the last couple of years with this with the increased interest in the plant space, I feel like grow light companies have really upped their ante, upped their game.
Well,
But
just
even
in
if
time for us to all be hunkered down inside for the pandemic, not
Mhm.
getting our own natural light. Maybe does that work for vitamin D? I bet it would, like for us.
I feel like it does. I don't know if it's the same as a sad lamp, actually. I
Mm.
feel like it might be very similar, but I'll say I actually, right next to me at my office is actually very low light. And I recently just set up a table and I put a bunch of grow lights and I have like a crazy little botanist section over here. And I feel a difference that I have 2 grow lights on during my entire workday now. Um, I don't know if that's, placebo or not, because I also am
Yeah.
super happy because I have all my plants next to me. Um, But yeah, so if people are interested in these grow lights, I have a grow light section on my website of all of my recommended grow lights if people want to go check them out. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't get too worried about grow lights too. I mean, it can be as simple as putting a bulb into, a really beautiful light fixture. Um, but I would say just figure out your window situations. And then another important thing that I think designers don't realize, and I think most people who aren't plant people don't realize, is how far a plant is from the window greatly impacts the light. So you might think, "Oh, I have southern facing windows. I have some bright light, so I can put a plant anywhere in the room." But once you take a plant like 2 feet from a window, the volume of light greatly decreases. So
Oh,
you really want to be careful of not to put plants too far from your windows, or that natural sunlight isn't necessarily going to reach the plant and give the plant all of that, food that it needs.
got it. Got it. Well, plants, I always say rooms need at least like one living thing, whether it's a
Yes.
plant or whether it's the rabid dog outside my storefront right now. Hopefully that's not distracting you, but somebody's put their dog in a car and he's not having it. I record right here on Main Street. And so
Oh,
I have
wow.
amazing windows. I have plate here. I have these big storefront windows
Oh, beautiful.
that get so much morning light. They face east and it gets hot as a sauna in
I
here.
bet. Yeah.
But of course, I keep all my plants in the back. So I've learned something today.
Well, it's also interesting because you just showed me the most gorgeous floor to ceiling shop windows.
Yeah.
So you're getting eastern light,
Yeah.
which technically isn't the strongest amount of light, but because you have such a big window, the volume of light that your plants are getting is plenty, right? Where if you
Yeah.
had a tiny window with southern. So I think it's really interesting because everybody's lighting environment is so different, and I talk, sometimes I say, like, if you and I got the same snake plant, right, which is a very low light tolerant plant, um, but we got the same exact snake plant, same size, same soil, same nursery pot, and you took it home and I took it home, we would probably have to water it at different frequencies. We would probably like be caring for it in different ways because your home environment is so different than my home environment. Um, Not like to be totally dramatic about it, but
Right.
it is like everybody's home environment is going to be a little different. And obviously that's going to affect how you care for plants.
But I have a question about that. So, when it says low light plant, because that is what I gravitate towards,
Hmm.
low light, low maintenance.
Hmm.
Uh, if you put it in strong light, is it going to have an adverse reaction or it can just tolerate low light?
Okay, this is a great question. Um, Sometimes plants are marketed as like low light loving plants. And I think it's very important to reframe and understand that it's a low light tolerant plant. So plants, if you think about the sun, the strength of the sun outdoors versus indoors is so different.
Right.
It's so much stronger. So even a low light plant outdoors is going to be getting way more light than what they would be getting indoors. So you have to kind of think about that indoor outdoor thing because our plants weren't designed to be put in pots indoors, right? They live outdoors. They get various, flecks of sunlight throughout the day. Um, and I don't know, plants are amazing. I won't go down the tangent I was just about to go, but so low light tolerant is important to understand. But most of these low light tolerant plants actually tolerate a lot of light and actually love light. So the snake plant, which is the plant that I just brought up, I feel like
Mhm.
it's a very commonly found plant. It's beautiful. It has long structured leaves. Its nickname is mother-in-law's tongue. It has these long, like spade like leaves. And it would look beautiful, I think, in many different design styles. It's actually a highlight loving plant. And if you put the
Mm.
snake plant in a bright window, it might even flower for you.
What?
But I I actually, if you're interested in this plant, I just published a snake plant care episode on my podcast, and I go off on this rant because snake plants are marketed as low light tolerant because they can tolerate it. They always get put in the darkest corner of your room.
Right.
But snake
Right.
plants love high light, and I feel bad for them. So I'm on this campaign to like get snake plants in the light that they deserve, which is super nerdy. So yeah, so many plants I think you will find. I think in general, everybody overestimates how much natural light they actually get. So I think in
Mhm.
general, if you put lower light plants in a higher light situation, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with how happy they are.
Mm.
That being said, ferns that are low light plants, right? If you stuck a fern in a really bright window, I don't know if a fern would love that, especially too, they have really delicate leaves. If it was a sunny
Right.
windowsill, if the fern leaf touched the window, it could burn. So there are
Mm.
some plants who really do prefer not to be scorched by the sun. But I feel like there are so few homes that have light that is that bright that is like actually going to scorch something. So I feel like it can be a little relative there, if that makes sense.
This storefront scorches at 9
Yeah.
a.m. Like I walk
Okay.
in, it's 85 degrees. But yeah, it's floor to ceiling windows. But I had another question. So you mentioned that plants eat sun, which I love. Plants
Hmm.
eat light. But something I've never understood, and maybe this
Hmm.
would change the game for me with plants, is plant food. You
Ah,
know how they
okay.
sell the sticks or they
Yeah.
sell the
Fertilizer. Hmm.
yeah. What's up with that?
Oh, yeah. Great
Do I
question.
have to
Okay.
do that?
Yeah.
Because
Great.
okay.
So plants eat light through photosynthesis. They're converting, these kind of carbs that they're eating. Plants uptake water and nutrients through their roots. And the nutrients are also part of other processes and, things that they do. And I'm not a scientist, I'm not a horticulturist, so I'm not great at diving into the specific scientific things that are happening. But plants' roots is how they absorb their water and the nutrients. So in nature, plants have an infinite amount of nutrients and soil that their roots can crawl, across.
Mhm.
And if they deplete the nutrients in their, local space, their roots can just keep growing to find more nutrients and water. And
Oh.
plants, this is something that plants do all the time in nature. Because
Hmm.
we grow our plants indoors in pots that have finite amount of soil, growing media, and space, once plants, and so the growing media, the soil that we have is filled with nutrients like potassium, um, NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, are the three that plants really need to do a lot of, to function successfully. And if the plants have taken up those nutrients that were available in that soil and those nutrients don't get replaced, then the plant isn't going to function properly.
Oh.
So when you fertilize, because you add the nutrients back into your soil mixture that might be depleted.
Does that mean that I have to repot? Because potting plants is like it prevents me from getting plants. The idea of
Totally.
potting a plant. So do I have to like shake the old dirt out, put in some fertilizer? Could I just top it off? What does that look like?
No,
There's those
yeah.
sticks.
Great question.
Yeah.
Great question. So you should only be repotting a plant when its root mass has grown so large that it's growing out of the pot. And a lot of
Mm.
people actually get in trouble because they repot plants too early and they take a plant, say you have like a plant that's in a 4-inch pot and its root system is like happy in that 4-inch pot. And you put it in a pot that's 8 inches with all this extra soil. That root system isn't going to be able to uptake water fast enough. So, water is going to sit in the soil. And when too much water sits in the soil, it creates the conditions for root rot.
Oh
What
yeah.
happens is the roots literally rot in the pot and they evaporate. They like disintegrate. They kind of return to the soil. And then the plant has no roots to uptake water and nutrients and then it dies. So root rot is like a huge issue in novice, plant parents who don't really know how to water properly yet and who may have these issues. So you see root rot issues a lot with people repotting because they think that they should, but their plant's actually super happy in the pot.
Oh.
So with fertilizer, there's a bunch of different ways that you can do it. You can get the kind of granules that you actually just sprinkle on the soil and then you water. And every time you water, the water kind of catches some of the granules and just waters the plant that way.
Yeah.
I love liquid fertilizer. I'm a lazy plant parent, so I want it to be as easy as humanly possible. I have a Spoma organic. It's pet safe, kid safe, an organic liquid fertilizer that I just dump into my watering can. And when I water, I just kind of fertilize, once a month, depending on the growing season.
Hmm.
Um, and then you can do those little plant food sticks. You
Yeah.
can also kind of buy granules that you mix up with water and then you put that in your watering can, which is like way too much work for me. So there's all
Yeah.
sorts of different ways that you can fertilize. But, if you got a new plant, like the soil in the pot should be enough. When you're growing edible plants, like Tomatoes are heavy feeders. That's what they're called. So you're going to really need to be fertilizing that plant in the growing season when it's growing fruit. But when you're talking about like your normal like house plants that you're going to have, I wouldn't worry too much about fertilizing unless
Oh,
you have a
good.
plant that's been in the same pot for like 5 years.
Hmm. No, they don't live that long. But but yeah, nice try. So, one other thing that comes up a lot, and you mentioned earlier, no light. Like,
Yes,
there's air
let's talk about it.
plants,
Yes.
there's bamboo, which I use a lot. Money plants can suffer. These are the only things I've had good luck with. But are there plants that can thrive in very low to no light? Bathroom plants.
So very low to no light. No light, I'm going to say no. And I'm going to say it's a slower death. It's basically a slow death. However, there are people in the world that think one plant that will die in a year is cheaper than weekly flowers. I understand that thought. That
Mm.
makes me sad, but I get it. And they're okay kind of replacing a plant frequently. Another thing you can do is get two of the same plant, one in the bathroom, one in the no light room, and one in a light room. And
Oh.
every couple of weeks you swap them out.
Oh,
So
that's good.
that's kind of something you could do. You could have a rotating plant that you just kind of put in for a couple of weeks and then take out, but
When the
that's kind of a
company
headache.
comes. Yeah, yeah.
Um Another thing you could do in bathrooms is, they have really beautiful grow lights like that look like a frame that's
Oh,
illuminated that you could put on the wall. So you could kind of do some sort of grow light installation in a bathroom that's really cool. I have a friend who's like a next level plant parent who like really wanted ferns in his shower. He rigged grow lights that would go on throughout the night. So he'd go to sleep and the grow lights would be on from like 10 to 8 a.m. to give the
yeah.
plant the light it needed. And then he would have this like very lush bathroom like oasis. Um but I think that there are some things that you can do with no light. So fake plants are an option.
Now hold on.
I
Hold
Okay.
on. I have a whole diatribe on fake plants,
Oh, tell me. Okay.
but I want to hear yours first because I am not a plant. I can't even call myself a plant parent. What am I? Like a plant something that's, you know, not impressive.
You're a plant owner. You're a
A
plant
plant
mom. You
owner.
have
I feel
plants.
like parent means nurturing, which I'm not quite there, but I do care about them.
Okay.
But tell me your thoughts on fake plants because I would think you have many.
So I've actually really changed my thoughts on fake plants over the years. At first I was super anti fake plants, and I understand why there are a lot of people that are anti fake plants because I used to be one of them. It's not good for the environment. They look fake, they don't look real, they collect dust. I feel like when I think of a fake plant, I think of that like really dusty fake plant at the dentist office. It's just like covered in dust and spider webs that, you
Yeah.
haven't touched and no one's touched in like 10 years. Um but, there's just a lot of studies that are like showing that being around plants makes you happy. And so part of me is like, if you want the look of a plant, go do that. Like go get your fake plant. They make much nicer fake plants now too. Like
Yes, true.
if you really want to create this look, if you really want the emotional benefit of kind of seeing green and seeing nature, I also understand it. So I feel like I'm kind of more neutral now than being like vehemently against them. But I also think a better option than fake plants is botanical art. Like if you're
Oh,
gonna you could do, in a bathroom or a plant with a room with no windows, like you could do an amazing gallery wall of all sorts of different old botanical prints, or you could do a really big photo that's like really immersive that actually takes you there of a forest or something like that.
yeah.
So I feel like there are other ways to kind of incorporate that fresh, vibrant feel without, having a plant just kind of get sad. A lot of people also like I feel like I see orchids, like if you buy an orchid
Oh
that
God.
blooms for 2.99 from Trader Joe's or something, you can stick that in your bathroom, and then when it goes dormant, you can kind of deal with it however you want to deal with it. Like maybe then you take it outside, you put it in your windowsill, whatever you want to do. So yeah, so what's your feelings on fake plants?
Well, you said they make really nice looking fake plants right now, and they also
Mhm.
make really expensive ones, right? But I think that nice looking or nice fake plants is an oxymoron. I
Yeah,
hate
that's
all
fair.
fake plants.
Yeah.
I can't tolerate fake plants. I mean, I'm a plant killer, former
Mhm.
plant killer. I feel like now I have some new tools. I'm a former plant killer. And if you can't maintain a plant, no judgment, that's me, you should not have them.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then you should get, I love this idea of framed images of plants. Of course, I use that all the time, but I never use it as a plant substitute. So I love that as another idea. But also, I highly recommend dried flowers.
oh
I,
yeah. A
yeah,
beautiful vase of like dried flowers or dried grasses. That would
yes.
almost that would be amazing.
And sculptural, like my next door neighbor has this huge hydrangea tree and they dry and they last forever and they look so cool. So
Beautiful.
I love dried flowers. I love cut flowers.
Mhm.
And that brings me to the other thing I love and talk about a lot, plants you can't kill. Like,
Yes.
I need hardy plants, plants that can be patient with me and I'll be
Mhm.
patient with them. But I'm also, I find that a lot of those plants you can't kill are small.
Mhm.
Are there plants you can't kill that are larger? Because I want a statement plant, but
Mhm.
I don't want to invest in something that's going to be volatile.
Okay. So, here's my take on plants you can't kill. I think you can kill every plant. I also think that some plants that are marketed as really finicky actually are really easy to care for the right personality. So I think that the key to plant parenthood is picking the right plants for your lifestyle and your environment. So on my website, I have a plant parent personality test. By the way, I love your interior design personality test. I took it. I'm an eclectic. I like the eclectic style. Um, but my plant parent personality test, actually, it's a personality test that pairs you with the right plants for your lifestyle.
Yeah.
So where I think plants get killed is when there's a lack of understanding about light, which we've squashed some myths a little bit, and
Yeah.
also there's a lack of understanding about the plant's needs. So if you're a low maintenance plant parent, you've got little kids running around, you travel for work, you don't want to be watering your plant every day, right? Like you need something that's hardy. I have a feeling you might be a low maintenance plant parent because you've been saying you need hardy, easy to care, like
Here's
tough.
when I water my plants, just full disclosure. So I always have some water. I always have
Mhm.
it within arm's reach. And at the end of the day, when I have
Mhm.
some water left in my water bottle and remember, I'll just feed them whatever's left over. My backwash, essentially.
I love that. That's amazing. So, so right. So if you have if you're looking for the low maintenance, you know, plants that are drought tolerant. So that's interesting because that probably means you're not this plant parent personality type because there are other plants. So there are some plants that might want to get watered every day. So if at the end of every day you're giving everybody a drink, that's
Yeah.
actually a plant that wants a lot of water. So if you give a plant that doesn't want a lot of water, like a succulent really only wants to be watered like once every couple of weeks. If you're watering a succulent every day, the chance of that succulent getting root rot and like turning to mush is so high.
Oh, I
But
totally am doing that. I have one from Trader Joe's right now on my windowsill. And every night I'm just like, here's a splash for you.
So, succulents in general, if you think about it, in the desert, they go like long periods of time not getting water, and then they get a big drink, and then they go more periods of time. So, you're nailing it. It's in your windowsill, which is great.
Oh,
So, you
good.
know that succulents are high light. So, you
Yeah.
want to put them in the highest light situation that you have. It's a huge reason why people kill succulents is because they put them, on a desk or on a coffee table that's not in bright direct light. Succulents need bright direct light. The brightest light you have, usually you're putting your succulents in there. So yeah, but you could potentially overwater that succulent when they're way more comfortable kind of having a period of drought. If
Yeah.
you like to water something frequently, you might want to try a bird's nest fern or a fern that isn't as fancy. So ferns sometimes need humidity. So depending on how humid your office is, that could be kind of tricky. But there are hardier ferns like a bird's nest fern, which I absolutely love,
Mm.
or like a crispy wave or like a blue wave fern. And ferns love water, right? They like having kind of wet feet. So that might be a great one for you that you can kind of, I call them the mindful plant parent, because these plant parents actually tend to like to kind of be mindful and engage with their plants every day. For you, you're kind of, dumping water every day. So I think it's kind of about identifying like how you want to care for your plants, how frequently you're going to realistically water them. If you want to kind of be helicoptering like in their space, or if you really just want to like kick back. Because I
Right.
think it's interesting that you say I need something easy, I need something hardy, easy to care for, but then you're actually watering it every day, because normally when you think of
Yeah.
hardy, you think of a drought tolerant plant. So that's why I feel like I get hesitant to like recommend what's like the no kill plant, because you can kill any type of plant. That being
Right.
said, I'll say that there are definitely some forgiving plants that if you're a designer and you're working in a room and you're not really quite sure what the lighting situation is going to be, and you need a plant that like you feel like is really going to kind of tough it out and kind of be able to thrive in several different scenarios,
Yeah.
kind of like those plants that we talked, like the snake plant. So the snake
Right.
plant could be, I love gifting snake plants because snake plants can tolerate low light and they love high light. So whoever I'm gifting them to likely has a space in their home that they could put a snake plant. Um, Philodendrons are rather hardy plants. Pothos, I mean, oh man, in my house plant killer days, I had this pothos plant, which I still have. And I have such gratitude for this plant because it was so patient with me. I almost killed this thing so many times. I did the weirdest stuff. I almost drowned it once. I left it for 2 weeks in my house, in my apartment, without air conditioning. It was like the hottest week of the summer. I went on vacation. I came back, it was like so fried and wilted, but it bounced back. So pothos are
Wow.
very forgiving plants that I think would make for great like gifts, or like they can kind of be in medium light. They can definitely stand some direct light, but they also are kind of comfortable in lower light. um ZZ plants are
Oh
great.
yeah.
um they're
I have
really
used that.
beautiful. Yeah, they're really beautiful. They're kind of known as a hardy plant. They come in green, but now there's this new variety called the Raven ZZ that's black. The leaves are like
What?
black. So from a designer's perspective, I mean, having a black plant, that could be a really interesting statement plant.
That is
Um
awesome.
yeah. If you want a larger, you were mentioning you want like a larger tree or like a larger statement, I
Yeah.
would look at like any type of Dracaena. Um,
Mm.
those are kind of, Dracaena is a really wide genus. There's a lot of different options, but they're taller plants. They have kind of spiky leaves. A corn plant would be another amazing
Oh yeah.
option.
Those are not my
Corn,
favorite look wise. Yeah.
yeah, corn plants are definitely a little more old school of like
Yeah.
they kind of give you that 70s vibe, but they're hardy, man. I've seen corn plants
Okay.
surviving in like the craziest situations. Um there are
I'll
different,
keep that in mind. I'll keep
yeah,
that in
there are different ficus trees that aren't fiddly figs that are much less finicky that you could look into. I think we should definitely address the fiddly fig situation. This is an interior design podcast. Um
Everybody asks me, everybody wants one. I don't know the first thing about them.
Yes.
Tell us.
Let's talk about it quickly. So, fiddly figs, I think, sorry, I have some hair in my mouth. Fiddly figs, I think, are one of the most beautiful sculptural plants. They're absolutely gorgeous, and I completely understand why everybody wants one in their house. They have these fiddle-shaped leaves. The plant Latin is for this plant is Ficus lyrata. They have fiddle-shaped leaves, and they can grow to 6 feet tall. You can have a tree in your house. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And interior design magazines put them in every single photo. So in every photo you look at, there's a beautiful couch, a beautiful table, and then a fiddly fig in the corner. Because I feel like for corners, like
Right.
these larger plants, like really take up space in a corner. The issue
Totally.
is fiddly figs need bright light. And I have a
Mhm.
whole episode on fiddly figs. If anyone is a fiddly fig lover and wants to like really take a deep dive, you can go check that episode out. But because we like really dive into it. But basically,
Mm.
they like bright light. So if you have a fiddly fig, you need to put it in you need to put it in front of your window. You need to put it under a grow light. My fiddly fig thrives under my super modern, not grow light that I have it under.
Right. Right.
and they don't love to be moved. So they're kind of
Oh,
finicky where like they don't love to be moved to like a bunch of different conditions. Like once they find their light that they like, they enjoy that light. What will
so
happen
you
is they'll
can't
drop.
redecorate with a fiddly fig. Yeah.
Yeah. What'll happen is they'll drop their leaves, and it's just so devastating because those leaves are so big. It definitely like makes it hurts a little bit when they drop their leaves. Um, so you're welcome to get fiddly figs. I would just make sure that you have the right light situation. And also, a fun fact that I didn't know that I learned in the process of doing interviews for my podcast is corners can actually be the darkest area of a room. Because if you think
Oh,
about it, you have windows and the light moves through the window and kind of bypasses the corners.
right. Those are at the diagonal. So it would be
Right.
hard to reach them. Oh, that's so interesting.
So a lot of people put plants in the corners
Yes.
thinking, oh, it's right next to a southern facing window. It's going to get so much light. I did this for 4 years ago in my house. I had a lime tree in a corner because I thought that it was going to be fine. Lime trees are like super, super highlight plants. So I've kind of I have this like setup that I do in many corners of my house where I have like a plant stand that has three different tiers, and I put three plants, and then I hang a grow light on top of it to kind of fill the space of the corner, but also make sure those plants are properly lit. So just be wary that whatever plant you're putting in a corner, like really be a super sleuth and like really looking at, okay, are there any sunbeams hitting any aspect of this corner? Is this corner actually like mistakenly really dark? Do I need to kind
Mm.
of reevaluate and make sure that I'm putting a snake plant or a ZZ plant or something that's low light tolerant in there if that's what you're working with?
Do you know what I have learned today? Just to bring this full circle, Maria.
Tell
I have
me.
learned that now, as a designer, instead
Uh-huh.
of placing the furniture first, I have to place the plants first and then put the furniture around the ideal light for the plants. And guilty as charged, I was just designing virtually a lake house in Minnesota today.
hmm
And I was like, looky here, we have a corner right by a window. Let's put a big plant there. So I totally have egg on my face because I put baby in the corner and baby ain't going to get any light,
Oh
even
my
though it's
god, I
by a
love
window.
it.
Yeah.
That's so
So
funny.
thank you for sharing this plant wisdom. You are definitely a plant parent to the extreme, and
To
I
the
am on
extreme.
my journey. Like,
Yes.
I'm going to look at your grow plant blog or web page, and I'm going to be curious, and maybe I'll ask for one for next Christmas.
Yeah, I'll
So
send you
little by
some.
little.
Oh, sorry, one second. My phone came in. I'll send you some links. You can put them in the show notes. And I know that I I sound intense in this conversation, but everybody has been there, right? You really don't know what you don't know. And if people are interested in kind of taking deeper dives for plants, because I think the other thing is you don't know what you don't know until you realize what you don't know. And then you're like, oh boy, there's a lot I need to learn. And we really have episodes for every level of plant parent on Bloom and Grow Radio, from Snake Plants 101, if you like that plant, to how to water your plants. We have an amazing episode that just talks about how to correctly water your plants. Like that's it, you know? So we hit the basics. We have some nerdy, plant science deep dives on photosynthesis if you really want to nerd out about how exactly plants eat light as well. But there's really something for everyone. And actually, there's an entire plant parent personality in my personality test that's called the design based plant parent. And it's
Oh,
all about people who use plants as part of their design aesthetic, and like they collect plants with an eye for design instead of just an eye, wanting to see how the plant's going to like look. So I love
right.
your thought about putting plants first. And I don't think you have to go to that extreme, because I know how passionate you are about designing, but at least kind of while you're putting your couch and your coffee table, just kind of like taking a look and being like, oh, which direction do the windows face? Like, I wonder what I should put here,
Well,
just a
I'm going to
little.
sound so much more knowledgeable. I'm going to impress all my clients, and I'm not going to tell them that I feed my plant backwash. I'm not going to say that. But if you'd like an episode taking a deep dive and how to save your leftover water from the day, that I can help you with, Maria.
I'm gonna steal that tip, Betsy, honestly. Now at the end of my day, what I don't drink is going in my plants right next to my desk. I love that. I'm taking that home with me.
I do it with the dog water too, FYI. Um, yeah, at the end of the day with the dog water, I'm like, who needs this? Who needs this? Anyway, so thank you for joining us. And where can people find you? Bloom and Grow Radio podcast for sure. But if they want to hop to that website,
Yes. So the Bloom and Grow Radio podcast, you can head to my website to take your plant parent personality test. That's probably the best place to start. You get paired with your personality, but then also I match you with the best episodes that I think are perfectly suited for your personality. So we have a lot of episodes in our catalog where it can get overwhelming. So you can go over and do that. That's bloomandgrowradio.com/personality. And I'll send you those links. And then I'm on Instagram and TikTok at Bloom and Grow Radio if you ever want to come hang out with me on social medias as well.
amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for having me on your podcast. And I hope we bloom and grow together as podcasters and now friends.
Yes, absolutely. And I was telling you this on the episode we did for me, but I'm like, oh man, I can't wait to move out of my furnished rental I'm currently in to get my own home so I can start designing and hit you up for all the advice.
Totally. Hit me up. We'll do a whole episode on designing Maria's apartment with plants in mind.
Yes, with plans in
Yeah.
mind. I love that.
All right. Well, bye, everybody. Thank you for joining us and go check out Maria's stuff. It's amazing. I love her website. Until
Oh,
next
thank you.
time. Yeah, it's great. It's great. I even checked out the bottom to see who the designer was because it's on point.
I
Until
love
next
it.
time, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
A big thank you to Aton and the Embassy, who wrote our theme song. A shout out to Catherine Heller, who owns the podcast shop and is our editor extraordinaire. We also want to thank Ginny Sunasan and her team at the Savvy Podcast Agency for their help with our social, our YouTube channel, and so much more. We also want to thank Uploft, which is our parent company who supports this podcast. And lastly, we owe a huge debt of gratitude to you. Thank you so much for tuning in and for all your support.